Hi, my name is Dave Reske, CEO of Now Speed Marketing, and welcome to this edition of Marketing in the Now, where we focus on uncovering the myths of leadership and marketing with some of the world's most interesting people. And my guest today is Paul Kuhne, who's been a CMO for at least 6 companies and has deep experience with demand generation. He's worked for many startups, but also with large companies like Cisco and others. And the issue that we'll be talking about today is one of the most fundamental of all marketing issues, which is really how to get their freaking attention, right? Paul, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, David. I appreciate it. Yeah, no, I think whenever we talk about this, I always think of like the bulletin board in college where it's like this sea of color, so your eyes just glaze over. And I think that in some way with the mix changing, mostly post-COVID or just people being barraged because they got their digital marketing game on during COVID, it's more crowded than ever.
Yeah, absolutely. So the challenge of, like getting their attention is it is really one of the most fundamental challenges of all marketing, right? We often, I feel like in marketing, especially in digital marketing, we get really wrapped up in systems and process and techniques and connecting all the dots and there's a lot of there's a lot of technical knowledge that you need to make all the pieces work. But fundamentally, if we don't really grab people's attention with the ad or the offer or what it is we're proposing or selling, none of it really matters. You've lived there for quite a while. So tell me your thoughts about.
Yeah, no, both in-house and consulting. Yeah, and I think that
Yeah.
you're right. If there is the diligence to have some type of sales methodology and marketing automation and scoring and service level agreements, that's great once they raise their hand, right? And you want that sort of expectation and you want that to be as robotic as possible while also human. But you need to fill the funnel first. And I think that especially in the last few decades with the focus on ARR and SaaS for investment, it's just a huge amount of pressure, right? In technology marketing. And so you can sort of run around with your head cut off or feel like you need to have the latest tech, but you can't implement 17 systems at the same time. Or you feel like, we can't afford to be creative or we don't have time to listen to the customer. And so I think that, or we have to, or the sort of T crossing and I dotting, right? As opposed to don't do it if you're going to do it poorly. You can do less and go deeper. And I think there's two parts to that. How do we be honest with ourselves with a sort of discovery mindset to listen to the customer and prospects to make sure there's a product market fit? And if there's not, what can we do to become as nice of a nice to have as possible? Versus just, hey, we're 15 years ahead of our time and we hope people buy if you're a technology company. And then how do you not get lost in the jargon, right? If we're at a marketing and say, well, conference, you might talk to your peers in a jargon oriented way. But I really think that people are people at the end of the day, and consumer marketers are sometimes better at this. They're because they hold the revenue number, right? It's different. I'd heard that on a different podcast recently. And so I was like, oh yeah, that's something to that. We sort of take the psychology for granted in B2B marketing sometimes and forget that people go to Starbucks and Dunkin' Donuts and Target and what have you at the end of the day and are driving down the hallway. And this doesn't mean you need an out-of-house budget and a big brand, but people are thinking like that. And so I think where B2B fails is the reluctance, the risk aversion taking to being remotely creative in the messaging, or with an ad campaign approach, even if it's a primarily digital campaign, um, to really get their attention. Or similarly, with content marketing, to do it in the last 10 years for the SEO game where you're not really giving a value add to the reader, right? This isn't really being a good guide and shepherd. And so then you're not building that sense of trust and community. So they'll raise their hand when they're ready. And so I think part of it is how do we take an ad campaign approach and be aggressive with messaging? If we can be aggressive with channels in the mix in a stage appropriate, resource conscious way, that's great. And then how do we make sure that the content and thought leadership we're putting out isn't overly salesy, knowing that we have to hit numbers in the meantime. We have to keep the lights on. There's still a dialing for dollars and sales enablement function, but that's not what content marketing and getting their attention should be.
So let's just kind of unpack each of those kind of issues in one at a time here. So if you're talking to if you're a, let's put it this way, if you're a B2B marketer and you've really gone to market really primarily with features and benefits of the product, and we're talking about ways to kind of get people's attention, use more creativity, think outside the box, think bigger. How do you start to kind of think about that? Do you start to think about like, I need a wild video to get people's attention? Do I need, to add humor? Do I need, you know, wild colors and, creativity? Do I need an offer they can't refuse? What is it? How do you kind of start the conversation with management about like where they go for this, creating that messaging, that creative, that offer that's going to break through the clutter to, to get somewhere?
At the end of the day, I think that whether it's being honest with yourself or relying on some external people, or if there are some ICP prospects or customers that you can call upon or pick their brain, even if it's not, a customer advisory board, that you want to really start with thinking about how do you want them to think and feel and react. And that is where we don't do a good job. Even some companies that are being creative online still do airport ads and they're boring, right? And you're like, why are you doing that? I get that you're business travelers, you think that your buyers or your influencers are here, but how do you want them to feel? And I think that there's an emotional connection. And in order to do that with any of those ingredients you listed, whether it's color or pictures or visuals or words and voice, you need to distill that, right? Because people's attention spans are brief. We need to capture their attention by tapping into a pain point. Because no one is not shopping for efficiency and time savings and labor market challenges. No one's against those things. It's sort of like the war on poverty back in the day. No one's on poverty's side, but that's not what they're googling and that's not what they're searching for. And you can talk about those throughout the sales process, but that's not the reason they're going to fill out a form for a discovery call or demo, right? And so you really need to distill the message. I know when I was at Litmus, industrial data ops, not the email folks. One of the things we were doing was trying to distill what the heck industrial data ops is, because as an emerging system of record in manufacturing, or in a smart sector, people didn't know what that was. They weren't searching or shopping for it, or and analysts were calling it 15 different things. And so we had this concept of do more with data, because that's the goal at the end of the day, right? You're serving data up in that case so that it can be actionable at a factory level, at a plant level, let alone that you have these carbon emission mandates coming down the pike. And we went hard with branding podcasts and live streams and online seminars and booth experiences that way, because it pulled people in. Did it have them throw down their credit card and write a check for millions of dollars immediately? No, but it distilled the message and captured their attention. And I think the other part that's really important is we're not saying features and benefits are worthless. The minute they're ready to look under the hood, or you have a high intent lead, you need rich content there for different learning styles so they can explore. It's just that most people can't be led with that, right? You can't just throw these features and benefits at them. And one of the other things I've done at a number of SaaS companies that are full stack, it's a mixed blessing to be full stack, to be a black box, because people don't know what the heck that is, especially if you're proposing a new and better way of doing things. And so I know that when I worked for a learning management system ages ago, one of the things we did was create an anti-demo, an undemo, which was actually meant so they could get their hands dirty for 5 to 15 minutes as an actual user in the system versus being pitched to for, a few minutes amid a sea of trade show booths. And that was something that at that time was actually based on the work that the professional learning, the training team was doing every day with actual users. And so I think part of it is how do you make the features and benefits come to life the minute they're ready? And how do you lead with something emotional that isn't necessarily just cotton commercial? And, so what I think is really important is to lead with value. We hear that all the time in enterprise marketing and sales, but not be vague. So value being without being vague is something I'm big on.
Yeah, those are all really good ideas. So, the key takeaways I got from what you just said was, well, you talked about leading with value, but making the features and benefits come to life emotionally. And it feels like that emotional content is something that a lot of B2B marketers are a little bit afraid of. We think it's all a very logical purchase. You're talking about industrial data or industrial data ops, which it sounds as logical and concrete and hardcore as anything. But I'm sure you could, find an emotional angle about that, frustration, difficulties, challenges, right, that people have. in those areas.
Yeah, no, and I think that how do you make it come to life, right? I know one of the things I joked about at a few manufacturing companies was, is there some Dilbert of manufacturing? Is there dumb manufacturing, right? Because you don't want to offend people as well. I mean, some people do take that strategy, right? And there's some debate on LinkedIn these days. I don't think you want to offend people. I think you want to hit the pain point and have it come to life and be, oh crap, these people get it. They understand me, right? And so didn't ever end up doing a comic strip there, but definitely think there was something to that persona. I know back in the day when I was selling to libraries at tutor.com, we entertained um, white labeling an illustrator who was doing, they had a Dilbert-like comic strip called Unshelved for libraries. And we were actually going to be like, hey, maybe for our core value props, they could illustrate them for us so that they're really coming to life in a way that resonates with our ICP. And so and of course, some people I know, ClickUp is the one that comes to mind most of all. A few years ago, they did use humor online. They did do a Super Bowl ad, but they also used humor online. They didn't use high budget actors, but they were showing the challenges with project management, good, bad, and ugly, right? And they made it come to life in such a way that people would nod their heads because other people were banging their heads against the wall in a very office spacey type way, right? And so that I think is huge, and we tend to jump over that because it seems unserious. To your point, right? And how do we capture that in organic social cards or in video that doesn't cost a lot of money, or in polls that people actually fill out? But it is possible, and that certainly cuts through the clutter almost immediately because any hint of whimsical or creativity goes a far way in B2B. And it's to get their attention. It's not to mask the vaporware. It's to get their attention so you can expose them to this wonderful world of product. Similarly, I think as we move beyond crappy backlinks and SEO as a buzzword, there's some high quality backlink options. But the reality of SEO in some B2B contexts that are pioneering is that your landing pages almost need to be off brand because you need to bring people on a journey from where they are to where you want them to be because they're not searching for it or thinking about it the way you want them to be, even if you have awesome blueprints and good content marketing that's trying to control the conversation. And so that it's a mind shift. And I think that can be hard to do for 40 to 60 hours a week if the sales process isn't established, if you're really early on, if the CEO and CTO just want to do one thing that is not data driven and you don't have that common data language internally. And that's hard. And then sometimes I think what's really important to explain to leaders or first time leaders is that the way you talk in a dog and pony show for funding or the way you talk to analysts isn't how you run the business internally. You need to be honest with yourselves about conversion rates and efficacy in the prospect experience. And your super raving fans that are already ahead of the curve at the front end of the bell curve are not representative of the middle, right? So you have to figure out how to scale that experience. And I think that being more creative in the message in a way that in your gut and through some cursory, if not exhaustive efforts will resonate with the ICP is really important. And it doesn't need to be high budget, right? It could be all organic online if you wanted to. I think throwing some money behind it will help, but there's ways to be creative no matter where you are stage wise.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. So you're saying you really got to understand the message that's super important, but you've got to really focus on the core pain points of each of the people within your target buying community, and then be as creative as you can to get that message across. And then leverage all the different tools you've got, right? You've got video and content. And it feels like that's one of the biggest challenges, or one of the big challenges in B2B, where we've got not just a single buyer who's, like in B2C, you might have a single buyer at a certain
Sure.
age or income that's your target buyer, but we've got different buyer types in different geographies, in different industries that all have different challenges and different, there's not just one pain point, there's many pain points for all of them. And you've got to basically find a way to reach out to all of those in different ways at different times in the buyer's journey, right?
Well, yeah, and there might be, you might have a tagline or a boilerplate statement of some sort, but everything doesn't need to be the kitchen sink, right? And that like the 1 90-second video flash demo of yesteryear isn't going to be your main sales tool these days, right? And so I think there's ways to illustrate core parts of the pain point or prioritize what pain points you want to illustrate in a way that you think resonates with the 25 to 45 something people or the 45 to 65 something people, especially if you're selling into both of them. And then I think if you can do that creatively, whenever I've been, and I haven't always been creative and I haven't always had the energy to cross sell that internally up the wazoo. But when you are, it can take people a hot minute. Like when I did that undemo thing and when I hired a booth ambassador, which we finally were able to get rid of because it was expensive for a small startup, at that LMS, people were really dubious at first. And then they came and were like, oh, this is better than standing at a demo station and doing nothing, right? This is better. You're giving out stupid orange, green, and blue things, but people love them. And talking about the cell phone holder is a way to pull them in. And then they're looking at the screen. And we actually had the professional learning team, kind of home shopping network style, hawking different features as people played with it on their own as a stakeholder in the system. Because we didn't need to hire an actor. We wanted something that was, legit and technically rich. And that was really cool to see come to life. Now, the flip side of that, to how you started the conversation, was we were also trying to implement Marketo at the same time, which is an amazing system, but like Greek to people if they've never done anything remotely Sales 2.0 before. So at a smaller show where we didn't do that full whiz bang amazing experience and spotter campaign and social back channel, we actually just used campaign data to get meetings and looked at their lead score to get meetings. And I reached out because I was going to a show and we set up breakfast, lunch, and dinners because I joked with sales that I never wanted them in the booth. I just wanted them meeting. And so you can still be sales conscious while being creative, right? You still want to move more people through the funnel. You still want to scan everybody in your cousin, but only have humans follow up with the people that are most ready. And I think that there's a hesitancy there. I know in other places, like when I was at Brain Pop, people sort of gave an eyebrow raise when I first asked for a mascot, but the characters were the core of these animated videos that had a rabid following among teachers, kids, and families, and that really helped the booth experience come to life. And now, many years later, Lego acquired them. There's a Lego robot in the lobby, and so there's not one set of creative tactics that will work for all businesses. And some things fail. I know I also tried a blow up robot that spun around from the ceiling based on our amazing booth location, and it looked like I was hanging the robot. So not everything works. But and one time I had to wear the robot costume when I had to fire a lethargic actor, and we had like a raffle in someone else's booth because apparently I'm the perfect mascot size, and I had the flu, and so that was great. But it's a but that but not everything conservative works either. You have to be honest with yourself and not just try it for 3 days. About, hey, is this message resonating? And what are we basing that on data wise? Hey, are these few channels resonating? Are we half-assing them unintentionally? Do we need to sort of do less and go deeper? Are there certain types of social content that are resonating better? Can we recycle stuff? Because I think there's also a tendency in that box ticking to be one and done. Like you or I will read our 7 messages in our 7 touch nurturing. You or I will read everything we post on our social account, but that's not the prospect experience, right? Or even the customer experience. And so you have to remember that some amount of repetition, and LinkedIn is certainly different than Twitter was back in the day, but some of repetition, just like radio ads of your, is still very necessary.
Yeah. So I hear you talking about the booth experience and event marketing, and I live in more the world of digital marketing. Where we're focused on search and digital advertising and the website and email and all of those channels. And is there a way for the organizations that are struggling to create more creativity and energy in their marketing? Should they be really starting with the booth experience if it's B2B?
No, not at all. I know I got there from some creativity. I think the challenge there is how do you apply the same creativity in offline channels, right? Because
But
even
maybe the,
cheap trades, I mean, online channels, sorry, in online channels.
yeah, but maybe
Um,
there's more energy and creativity happening in on the trade show floor that could be brought into the online world. Or
Absolutely. I think it's translating it,
yeah,
right? And so I know one of the things we did after that big trade show I talked to where we had this anti-demo, undemo experience is we made our post-marketing the message of the post marketing was continue the learning. So we left this sandbox open, which was a mess after the trade show because everybody's poking around doing what we asked them to on this little card. But by leaving it open and then we cleaned it up later, we had this like 50% open rate, which is ridiculous, right? It was way above 10 to 15%. And so this like huge from a few thousand people that we scanned, and the other people had like platinum sponsorships that were the 2 busier booths on the floor. And so that was like, okay, we need to figure out an online way to let them get their hands dirty, but that might not be as scalable right now because a sandbox instance is messy. And then, God forbid, they reach something messy, then they'll have a bad experience with the system because we're not whispering over their shoulder the way we are in the booth. And so I think we thought about is does an online series make sense? And we didn't end up doing it ultimately. Um, I think that I know one of the things we did at Litmus was it was really hard for me, maybe not for everybody, to chase the webinar du jour. I was having a really hard time with that, and I wasn't seeing the conversion we wanted. And so we tried something that we see in marketing and sales tech a lot, which is this webinar on steroids, this half day or full day seminar thing, right? And so it was a chance to bring in partners from across the ecosystem, even be a little bit of an ABM play with target accounts, with our biggest customers. And that was, low cost. We put maybe a little bit of money beyond sort of the organic channels to promote it, but we were able to brand it in a way um, that tried to cut through the clutter with that do more with data message. And there's a lot of logistics that goes into a 4 to 10 hour event, but it was online. It didn't sort of have the same experience as the booth. But the thing that was hard there is we wanted to do funkier online experiences as part of that, but people aren't used to that yet. They're used to like the bad virtual trade show and they're used to a webinar, but 1 to 2 places to chat or interact or speed date was almost like a bridge too far. And so we were trying to figure out how to grow into those features so people would actually use them. And so one of the things we did that we could control was in order to sort of launch the new live stream, we had a almost sports center or political convention approach where the interstitial content was the two hosts, our internal subject matter experts of this program, who were able to reflect and react while we transitioned the sessions. And we did that the second time. And that was kind of fun because it also got them more comfortable with doing that. And so that captures, in that case, a little bit of that booth experience, a little bit of the personalities. We did actually have an avatar created for them, and the brand for these summits was different than the new branding for the company. But I think there are ways to do it online for low budget. I think we just have to, especially if your solution's already new and you're asking people to think different, we also have to be mindful of what people are willing to do. There because I remember when I went to a trade show where I thought koozies were big, no one took them. Or I went to a trade show where we did try flat Stanley stuff and it worked great in social, and other places it didn't. And so it's interesting. Not every idea works, but as long as you haven't shelled out a platinum level sponsorship and blew it, you're not really losing a lot. You're just learning from that experience. And you can even ask people if you're just hard to do when you're tired, is, why didn't they come to this webinar? Why didn't they come to this trade show? Why didn't they follow up? What did they think of it? And obviously you can implement surveys to do that. But I think some degree of actual one-to-one calls, um, sometimes without permission, would really help cut through the clutter. Because I think that sometimes I've had the experience where client services and sales is really nervous to have you talk to customers or lost deals or people that are in the pipeline. Whereas sometimes a third party, market research 101, a third party more can get better answers and real honest insights there. But I do think that you're able to sort of apply online, or you could figure out, what 1 or 2 types of videos do we want to do, whether we use internal talent or not, or whether we rely on AI or not. What handful of social cards are we going to do so that social is mathematical, but Monday's a joke and Tuesday's a vocab word and Friday is X, Y, or Z, right? I think there are ways to do it so that you stand out. So it's not just pretty branded cards, but they're still doing the same old, right? That's what you want to avoid. It doesn't mean you can't share the press release, tell a customer story, share a case study. Sure, have that be part of the mix, but typically that's going to influence people later in the funnel or very high intent.
Yeah. You talked about a lot of different tactics that you've had experience with that have made a difference for the companies you work for. So my brain often works in like charts, like so. I'm almost thinking about like a table of like marketing content or tactics, and then maybe those are the rows, and then the columns are all of the creative things that I could try, whether it's a video or it's a giveaway or it's a contest or it's a ad creative, and just kind of thinking a way, ways to think outside the box and get my creative juices flowing to kind of get out there. I mean, you've been
And that's
doing
just another
content.
layer, right? That's
Yeah.
not dissimilar from what we might. I don't want to get lost in planning for planning's sake, but the way whether it's serious decisions chart from back in the day or whatever sort of buyer journey at a high level you want to talk about from awareness, consideration, decision, and then we've all seen sort of parts of the marketing mix, which is a little black and white, mapped to that. But I think it's that same rubric, just some rubric, have some rubric where then you're like, okay, which of these 15 types do I want to try? And what would push the envelope in them? And is there connective tissue to the envelope pushing? I don't need multiple connective tissues. We don't need like full Geico, right? We're not multi-message, but let's not just do a live stream for the sake of it or a podcast, and are we going to syndicate it? Maybe webinars do make sense, but with what frequency? You know, if we think about two-dimensional social content or, lightly animated social content or GIFs or memes, like how would that work for us? And so that's the first step, and then just doing it. And I favor doing less and being successful versus we said we were going to do 17 things per week and we can't possibly get to them. And I'm, up till midnight. And so I think it's okay. How do you think through that creatively? Is there a way to connect the two-dimensional and three-dimensional tissue so that it makes sense, so that they know it's you when they see it? Or they will get used to that, memes are off brand or jokes might be, but this is part of the mix. And then half of it or two-thirds of it looks more like an integrated campaign, right? And so that, or just even the way you structure the webinar arc or the way you structure the show is reaffirming some of these pain points or relatability that you're trying to get across. Um, but I think that it does start with some sort of whiteboarding and brainstorming, right? The ideas that you would usually joke about and be dismissive and never reach the light of day, but let some of them reach the light of day when you're like slap happy and tired in the conference room or on Zoom.
Yeah. And then try something and go with it. We just have a few minutes left, but I wanted to come back to a comment you made about AI. So, what is the role of AI in brainstorming and research and creativity and helping marketers create tactics that break through the clutter? Or, is AI a guarantee to create something ordinary and vanilla that doesn't break through the clutter? So, how do marketers think about should be
I
done?
mean, I think two things. I think you get what you put in, and we're still in early days. And even the specialized solutions for go-to-market are based on the same language models that are out there. They're some of the main ones. Um, and those solutions are also in early days. But I think just like the early days of marketing automation, you will get an advantage by being at the forefront, even if everything doesn't work. And I think there's core it's I think AI and saying you get what you put in, AI is your sidekick, right? And so it is extending your capability as an individual or of every individual in a team of 50 or five. And so part of that is it's sort of like encyclopedias or calling the library on steroids from 40 years ago in terms of the research that could go into what the market thinks of X, what a certain ICP thinks of X, what competitors are doing about Y, or what type of companies exist that are doing X, Y, or Z. So there is a source content perspective that's incredibly helpful for product marketing or for marketers if product marketing doesn't exist. um, to get you a lot of information really quickly, and kind of think about and organize it even in ways that would help you process it based on how you process information. Um, the one we hear about less so, but first was like write everything and it goes right out the door immediately. So I don't think that's a good solution. But I do think there is an element of impartial third party drafting that it can do, or impartial third party drafting with an asterisk, which means it understands you more over time, or understands your company brand and inputs more over time because you've set those parameters. And so that can save time. I think you can often still tell when something has been not edited or lightly edited and written by AI. And so I think that will get better over time. I think as we think about the creativity and the social first, email first, website first content mix, the visual AI capabilities could be kind of fun to play with to help your pain points come to life, to create videos or two-dimensional illustrations or avatars or comics that you would not be able to do on your own or afford with a freelancer. Um, Is that going to replace the idea that maybe it's cheaper to bring a videographer in-house, which is still a very revolutionary idea for a lot of startups and scale ups? Not necessarily, but I think that it can help even them do further because then if say you had someone, a freelancer or a full-time person, they could focus on the stuff that needs to be edited. The down and dirty YouTube stuff, the clipping that is two-thirds correct, if you let the AI tool clip it from a webinar or a podcast, like learn to live with that, whether you put bottom thirds and bumpers on it or not. I think the polish for the sake of polish is just an extension of the checklist thing. And I think it's bothersome, but I think it's fun. I know we play with AI songs and AI images with our friends and peers, but that could be really great. So, and we love it. And so that could be really great social content for B2B. Why not do the playlist, right? Not like funny songs that you're not paying royalties for. There's ways to sort of cut through the clutter in a fun way that for zero to a few hundred or a few $1,000s a year at the most, there's a lot of tools to help you do that.
Yeah, those are all really good ideas. So it sounds like what you're saying is you got to understand that messaging first, but AI can have a powerful role in the research phase, getting you accelerating the cycles of learning that you're going through. It can have a real powerful role in the competitive research phase, kind of helping you understand what's out there, what's possible, what your competitors are doing, right? And then it sounds like you're saying experiment or leverage the creative aspects, which is content creation, video, audio, all of those different elements.
Yeah, it's not an autopilot. If you don't like what it creates, play with the inputs or try something different or try a different tool.
Yeah,
Everybody's always debating nuanced solutions versus Claude versus Chat GPT, and they're better at some things than others. But I think it can help you diversify your mix content wise quicker than you might have been able to otherwise. Um, and it doesn't mean you're trying to mask it as not AI either necessarily, especially if there's images or songs. I don't think you employed a lyricist somewhere in the back room, right? So I think there's a lot we could do there. And even if you're not going in the deep end, dipping your toe in the water in any of that will be more than a lot of B2B other places are doing. And obviously not all businesses are SaaS, but if you look at what is a handful of SaaS companies have gone public since the height of COVID, like there's no reason not to take a risk. In a number of sectors, investment has dropped off in FY24, right? Like you need to cut through the clutter. You need to do the brand work that makes demand easier in the medium term. Otherwise, it will never be easier. You need to implement that modicum of discipline and technology that you talked about at the top of the call in a way that's culturally appropriate but does exist. Otherwise, it's just you can't dial for dollars effectively for 10 to 20 years. And you could be lucky, but it's not the best sort of strategy to scale and exit.
yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. It feels like AI can have a powerful role in executing and helping you research and executing, but it doesn't feel like it's going to help you come up with that. Well, I was about to say it's not going to help you come up with the idea, but it might give you a lot more research to
It,
come
it might, I mean, it might
right?
give you ideas, right? The same
Right.
way it's around the table too, right? If you're sitting around the table with customers, with your team at a startup of with 0 to 15 people, 0 to 5 people, if there's like a marketing leadership team, it's based on the inputs or documents you've given it, sources you've given it, it might be able to process it faster or just summarize it in a way that people can consume beyond the whiteboard virtually if there is no office, if it's a hybrid environment. Um, and if it stumbles upon words or slogans that you use verbatim, I think that is the exception to the rule. I think that I know from when I was doing more work at Cisco around digital transformation, you know, digital transformation will automate what can be, but what's left behind is the processing, the human skills, the collaborative skills, the life skills, the 21st century skills, whatever you want to call it. And that's where creativity is. The AI just gives you scale and breadth that you can put through your creativity filter. Now, when it comes to visuals and other things, it lets you maybe spit out more creative formats than you could on your own, which is also kind of fun to try because you want to appeal to different learning styles, reading styles, processing styles of your ICP.
Yeah, I love it. I love what you just said. It helps you, it brings the scale and breadth to your creativity filter, and then you can decide worth keeping and worth trying, and then help you scale the execution of it. So it's really powerful. Well, Paul, this has been a great conversation. Started really talking about ways to increase awareness and to break through the clutter. And it sounds like you've got a huge amount of experience doing this. So if people want to connect with you and learn more about how to work with you or continue this conversation, what's the best way for people to interact with you?
Sure, please hit me up on LinkedIn. Kuhne is the last name, or Paul at Urgency, urgency.biz is my email. I'm happy to talk.
Great. Thanks again for taking the time, Paul.
Thanks so much, David. Take care and have a great day.